Some children never hear anyone say, "You're too young to worry about that." Instead, they hear conversations about unpaid bills, family conflicts, or problems no child should feel responsible for. They become the one who comforts a crying parent, looks after younger siblings, or learns to hide their own fears because there simply isn't room for them. From the outside, people often admire these children. They're called mature, responsible, wise beyond their years. But psychology asks a different question. What happens when a child learns to survive by growing up before they're ready? The answer isn't as simple as losing part of a childhood. It can quietly shape the way they trust, love, rest, and even see themselves long after they become adults. Growing up too fast doesn't always mean experiencing obvious trauma. Sometimes it's much quieter. It happens when a child consistently carries emotional burdens that belong to adults. Psychologists often describe one version of this as parentification, where a child takes on responsibilities meant for a parent. This responsibility can be practical, like cooking meals or caring for siblings, or emotional, like becoming the family's peacemaker or therapist. While helping at home can teach valuable skills, the problem begins when these roles become a child's identity instead of a temporary situation. Childhood is supposed to be a time for exploration, mistakes, and emotional development. When survival replaces discovery, the brain adapts in ways that can last for years. One of the first adaptations is hypervigilance. Imagine walking into your home after school and immediately trying to read the atmosphere before anyone speaks. Is dad angry? Is mom exhausted? Is today going to be peaceful, or should you stay quiet? Over time, the brain becomes remarkably good at scanning for subtle emotional signals. Neuroscience shows that repeated exposure to unpredictable stress can strengthen the brain's threat detection systems. This ability can feel almost like a superpower. As adults, these individuals often notice tiny shifts in facial expressions, tone of voice, or body language that others completely miss. Friends may call them highly intuitive, but intuition born from survival often comes with a hidden cost. Their nervous system may remain on alert even when there is no real danger. This constant alertness affects more than emotions. It changes how relaxation feels. For many people who grew up too fast, calm can feel strangely uncomfortable. Imagine finally finishing every task on your weekend, sitting on the couch, and suddenly feeling restless instead of peaceful. Their mind starts searching for the next problem to solve. If nothing is wrong, something must be wrong. Behavioral psychologists have long observed that repeated exposure to stress can train the brain to expect constant demands. In other words, peace becomes unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things don't always feel safe. Another hidden consequence appears in the way these individuals measure their own worth. Children naturally want love and acceptance, but if praise mainly comes when they are helpful, responsible, or emotionally strong, they may begin believing that love must be earned through usefulness. As adults, they often become the dependable friend who always answers the phone, the employee who never says no, or the partner who carries everyone else's emotional weight. They may look incredibly capable from the outside while privately wondering who they are when nobody needs them. Their value becomes tied to what they do instead of who they are. This creates an interesting contradiction. People who grew up too fast are often described as independent, yet many secretly struggle to ask for help. Think about someone who insists, "I've got it," even when they're clearly overwhelmed. It isn't always pride. Sometimes it's a deeply learned expectation that their own needs will not be met, or that expressing vulnerability will only create more problems. If childhood taught them that being the strong one kept the family stable, letting someone else take care of them can feel unfamiliar, even frightening. Relationships often reveal these patterns most clearly. Imagine meeting someone who seems calm, thoughtful, and emotionally mature. They rarely complain. They remember every important detail about your life. They always know when something is bothering you. At first, this can feel like the perfect partner or friend, but over time, you notice something missing. They know everything about everyone else, yet almost nobody truly knows them. They listen without sharing. They support without leaning. They love without believing they deserve the same care in return. Emotional openness requires feeling safe enough to stop managing everyone else's emotions for a moment, and that doesn't happen automatically. Interestingly, growing up too fast can also create perfectionism. This isn't simply wanting high standards. It's the quiet fear that making mistakes will have serious consequences. When a child learns that small errors can trigger conflict, disappointment, or instability, perfection starts feeling like protection. Cognitive psychology describes this as a pattern where the brain connects flawless performance with emotional safety. Years later, an adult may spend hours rewriting a simple email or avoid opportunities because they fear getting something wrong. To others, it looks like ambition. Internally, it often feels like survival wearing a professional disguise. Yet not everyone responds in exactly the same way. Psychology consistently reminds us that people are remarkably adaptable. Two children can experience similar hardships and develop very different coping strategies depending on temperament, supportive relationships, and later life experiences. Some become caregivers. Others become emotionally distant. Some seek constant achievement. Others avoid responsibility entirely because they associate it with emotional exhaustion. Human development is shaped by both adversity and resilience, not by a single experience alone. Perhaps one of the most misunderstood effects is emotional numbness. People sometimes assume that someone who doesn't express many emotions simply doesn't feel deeply. In reality, the opposite may be true. The brain has protective mechanisms that reduce emotional intensity when feelings become overwhelming for too long. It's similar to turning down the volume on a speaker that's been painfully loud. The problem is that lowering the volume affects everything, not just fear or sadness. Joy, excitement, and vulnerability may also become quieter. This isn't a personality flaw. It's often an old survival strategy that outlived the environment it was designed for. There's another paradox that surprises many psychologists. The children who appeared strongest are not always the adults who feel strongest. Strength developed under constant pressure often leaves little room for discovering personal identity. If your childhood revolved around meeting other people's needs, you may enter adulthood asking a surprisingly difficult question: what do I actually want? Decisions that seem simple for others, choosing a career, ending an unhealthy relationship, taking a day off, can become confusing because the habit of prioritizing others has become automatic. Self-awareness isn't just knowing your emotions, it's knowing your own preferences after years of putting them aside. The encouraging part is that the brain remains capable of change throughout life. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself through new experiences. This doesn't erase difficult childhoods, but it means old patterns are not permanent sentences. Learning to set boundaries, allowing trusted people to help, recognizing your own emotions, and experiencing relationships built on mutual care can gradually teach the nervous system that safety no longer depends on carrying everything alone. These changes rarely happen overnight. They happen through many ordinary moments where the brain quietly learns that the present is different from the past. One simple example captures this shift. Imagine two friends offering to help you move into a new apartment. Your first instinct might be to refuse because you don't want to inconvenience anyone. But this time, you say yes. The world doesn't fall apart. They don't resent you. They laugh, carry boxes, order pizza, and enjoy the afternoon together. It seems like an ordinary event, but psychologically it's much bigger. The brain collects evidence that dependence isn't weakness, and receiving care doesn't create danger. Small experiences repeated over time can reshape beliefs that were built across an entire childhood. Perhaps the deepest lesson is this: growing up too fast often teaches children how to survive, but not always how to simply live. Survival asks, "What must I do?" Living asks, "Who am I when nothing needs fixing?" Those are very different questions. The qualities developed through hardship, empathy, responsibility, resilience, emotional awareness, are genuinely valuable. The goal isn't to lose those strengths. It's to separate them from the belief that your worth depends on carrying burdens that were never yours to begin with. So if you recognize parts of yourself in this story, don't see them as proof that something is wrong with you. See them as evidence that your mind did exactly what it was designed to do: adapt. The remarkable thing about the human mind is that the same brain that learns survival can also learn peace. And perhaps the most powerful sign of healing isn't becoming someone completely different. Have to earn your place in other people's lives. If you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology behind everyday human behavior, consider subscribing to PsycheLens. And before you leave, ask yourself one question. If your younger self met the person you become today, would they see someone who is still surviving, or someone who has finally learned that it's safe to simply be?